Okay, these are the 6 good practices that I believe for me are non-negotiables in my studio. One of the hardest things about being a teacher is that you often do it by yourself, right? It's like a solo activity. You can operate and run your business, run your studio however you please. That means that you can get away with a lot. That also means that the expectations of you and your character are pretty high. So these are the things that I've had to develop to make me feel better about what I do in my studio. I feel like if I'm going to ask anything from my students and from their parents, that I need to express that in myself tenfold. These are the 6 rules that I've set up that makes it easier for me to uphold that commitment to integrity, transparency, and wisdom in the lesson. And if you don't know who I am, my name's Drake. I teach a studio of 35 students in Ithaca, New York. I was a Suzuki kid growing up, and I've been teaching the Suzuki method for 8 years. I make these videos, again, because I do believe in transparency, both within our studio and beyond it. And I also think that the Suzuki community would benefit from a wide diversity of teachers sharing what they've discovered in their home studios. So number 1 non-negotiable for me is that I take notes on every single lesson that I teach, and I read those notes before every lesson that I teach. I do so in this little notebook right here. So I have all of my notes from the year so far that sit in here, and I can look back week after week after week and see what the student has been up to. This helps me not forget most things that happen and follow up on any assignments that I've made. Number 2, I will not teach a piece that I have not practiced and can't play from memory. That requires me to keep up my skills, especially in the late Suzuki books, and also to be honest when I'm working with students on concerti and such. So I have a lot of personal practice to do because I have a lot of pieces that I want to teach. Number 3, this one's pretty hard, but it feels so much better when you start to follow it. Never ever cancel or reschedule a lesson for personal reasons. Of course, if you get sick or you need to travel for a family emergency or something, that makes sense. But when you know, and you will know, when you know that you just feel a little groggy or sleepy or unmotivated, or the timing of it is inconvenient, do not use that as an excuse to not show up for a lesson. And it goes without saying that you would never, ever just not show up for a lesson. The lesson with a parent and child is sacred, and kids and parents live for their lessons. It's like the buoy that gets them through from week to week to week. You start to undermine that if you even so much as reschedule a lesson by 15 or 30 minutes. I believe this for me in my studio. You can do it however you want. So I hold myself to that standard. I teach the violin every day from 2:30 to 8 p.m. That is like set aside in my schedule, Monday through Friday. I will not undermine the sacredness of our lessons just because it's convenient for me to move somebody 15 minutes one way or the other, or not come in to teach that day. I will acknowledge that this is harder if you are a new teacher and you don't have that many students, but I would just put yourself in the frame of the kind of teacher that you want to be when you have a full studio, that you're probably going to be teaching back-to-back lessons, and you need to build up the teaching muscle, the teaching endurance, to be able to teach exactly whoever's in front of you at the time that they're scheduled to come in. Number 4, I really believe in parent-teacher lessons. So I set up, at this point, 2 lessons per semester where the child either doesn't come or hangs out in the hallway, and the parent and I have open dialogue. Even though it makes me feel a little vulnerable, I really like having the opportunity for parents to share whatever is on their mind with me, and also for me to reflect back to them what I'm seeing, both positive and corrective. If we didn't have this time, then our feedback and talking to each other would be like in passing, going through the doors between lessons, or an email, both of which I don't think are optimal. So I love having these parent-teacher lessons set aside. I think they're non-negotiable for me to make sure that I'm giving the best to my families. Number 5, I started this at the end of the school year in 2022. I call it a transparency report. On this report, I give out to families. I put exactly how much money I made, how many hours I worked, all of the teacher training that I did, all the projects and initiatives I started, how many students came into the studio, how many students left the studio, quit the studio, and why. Not specific names, but information about why people moved on from our studio. And also some plans for the future. Because I think as Suzuki teachers, our studio students and families, we service them. And so I felt like it was my job to be completely transparent with them about where my energy is going. And that way they can also hold me accountable if I'm not doing what I said I was going to do. All right, number 6, this is really important. It saved me a lot of heartache. When I am going to take on a transfer student, I always reach out to the teacher whose student I am taking and make sure that everything is settled and has been responsibly talked through with that teacher. I leave the responsibility of breaking the news to the family who wants to study with me, that they need to talk to the teacher to tell them what their plans are. And I check in with the teacher and say, is this okay with you? Do you agree to this? Have you had an opportunity to talk to the family, etc.? And I think, an email is okay, but a phone call is even better. And then you also have the added benefit of that teacher perhaps being able to warn you about the family, or also provide context so that you can teach them to the best of your ability right when they come into the studio. And that concludes 6 non-negotiables for me in my studio to make sure that I'm giving my students the best. Hope you got some benefit from watching that.